And so it causes war and mass murder, and of course that elicits fear, and so negative eugenics, you can easily make the case that negative eugenics is evil. Okay, but there's a whole other side of eugenics, and it's called positive eugenics. Positive eugenics is like what was practiced by the Greeks and the Jews. Mm-hmm. For example, in ancient times, thousands of years ago, the Greeks started something called the Olympics. All of us, we all know what the Olympics is, right?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you ever heard the Special Olympics?
You never know. I know that sounds stupid, but you never know.
Special Olympics. Haha, very funny. Yeah, right. Okay, so it was the Greeks who started the Olympics. And this was like 3,000 years ago. 4,000? No, I think 3,000. 3,000 years ago, every 4 years, all war on the Peloponnesus, or the Peloponnesian Peninsula, basically Greece, every 4 years, all war would stop. And all the Greek city-states would come together, and they would say, hey, let's all stop fighting, and let's have like a 2-month competition. Everyone send your best warriors and your best athletes, and we'll compete. And they had some of the games, track and field, javelin, shot put, and all the people that would win, they would literally get a golden disc, or whatever. What is it? Gold, silver, and bronze. If you won, you would get gold, which means you're going to be rich. Silver would be enough money to buy a big farm, and bronze just means you could buy a horse or something like that. And these people, they were allowed. See, these people became like celebrities in their own time. They became famous throughout the land, and then they would return back home to their city-state, and then the government would award them by saying, because you won in the Olympics, either gold, silver, or bronze, you no longer have to pay taxes. And what that did is it created like a mating pressure, like a reverse mating pressure. Basically, what it means is, since they were allowed to not have to pay taxes, they could make more money and save more money over the course of their lifetime. And then these people would go on, since they were richer. What happens when a man becomes rich? All the hoes want him. And so what would happen is, these guys, they would win the Olympics, then they don't have to pay taxes, and all the women would want them, and then they would have more kids. And since this would happen every 4 years, the guys who were having the most kids were basically the biggest, smartest, strongest athletes. And then over time, since they would have more kids, does that make any sense? You guys understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's basically more just you bringing up the morale up, basically bringing up the more popularity. I know what you're talking about.
Yep.
Basically, it's giving the smartest people, the strongest people, the healthiest people, it's giving them an economic boost or an economic break. And because they're given special economic privileges, they end up having more kids than the average person. And since they have more kids, it is presumed that their kids will also inherit their traits. They'll be big, they'll be strong, they'll have good musculature, they'll have good eyesight, everything good. And then since they have a lot of kids, those kids will go into society and have their own kids. And over 100 generations, it'll improve the overall quality, the general quality of the population. That's the idea. And then who also practiced this were the Jews. The Jews, see, everyone thinks that the Jews were governed by a king, like King Solomon or King David and shit like that. That's not true. There was a period of time when the Jews were governed by these guys called judges, a judge. In fact, there's a book in the Bible called Judges. Well, the judges, the same thing. The same thing happened with the Jews. If you were smart enough, if you were wise enough, if you could pass all their exams and all this shit, certain people would be elevated to the ruling class of judges, and the judges ruled. And the judges, they were allowed to not pay taxes. They were exempt from taxes, and because they were exempt from taxes, they could save their money because they were allowed to save their money. They could afford more kids, and so it's the same thing. They would have more kids. They would have a lot more kids, and then those people would go into society and have their own kids. 200 years later, the average IQ of the Jewish population is really high, and that's how it is now. If you believe in any of that stuff, the Jewish population is what is it? The supposedly, if you believe certain books like the Bell Curve, Jewish people have the highest IQ in the world, and that's why. That's what some people believe. They postulate that idea.
Well, I think the Jews like the most richest people and shit, but they control all the media and all that shit because, like I said, they don't pay taxes, and so they control most of what we do in America, basically, because they rich.
Yeah, they're basically the richest demographic in the world.
My problem with some of the eugenics stuff is it becomes too tribal. So what that means is they don't really care. I mean, I'm sure in the early part of it was about superior genetics, but I think later on it just becomes about controlling wealth than it does actually who's more fit for the job type thing. And then you just have a bunch of people that are like borderline inbreeding. I think this is what usually happens. Like if you look at like most of our politicians' bloodlines or their relatives, almost all of them are some kind of CEO member, or even if they're not fit, a good member would be a good example would be Nancy Pelosi's son, who he just magically got access to a CEO job with very little college, and then he committed fraud twice and didn't even go to prison because he paid his way out. So then you have like stuff like that. So, and this is one of the reasons why I actually really like capitalism, but it's really only fun in the beginning. Like, I'm just being like, if you look what they did when they first came to America, I understand all the shitty genocide shit and everything, but like they would have things like they had little things they did, like little almost like it's some kind of game, a competitive game. So they wanted to benefit the white settlers and everything, and so they would there's this thing they had where they would take flags, and then when you put a flag down, you get so much land around that flag. It was really weird, and then you could sell and trade it.
Yeah, right. There's famous examples of that. One took place in Oklahoma. In fact, they made a movie about it, I think, with like Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, where if you sign up, you go to the government, and the government's giving away free land. It's literally like a race. Like there's a starting line, and you got to get a flag.
Yeah.
And you got to race to the plot, and you have to stake your claim. And yeah, sure.
Yeah, and then only that, like, here's something interesting, too. Like, you know how a lot of people, I actually did research into this. This also has to do with capitalism as well, or mercantilism, which mercantilism is technically capitalism without the dollar. So in mercantilism, it's just, I don't know if you know what that is. So it really has to do with gold bullion. And
I'm sorry, what?
Instead of all these complex things with the dollar, it's like how much you export and import trade goods instead of money.
Wait, I'm sorry. I just didn't
kind of mediator.
I didn't hear you. What are you talking about?
Mercantilism. It's a predecessor to capitalism.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. Yes, okay. You're right. Mercantilism is what it's called. Mercantilism.
Okay.
Not mercantilism.
Yeah, you're right.
But
sure.
Yeah, except it works with gold bullion and import trade goods as kind of how much your gold bullion's worth, or whatever you want to call it, the gold coin.
Yeah, okay. I would word it this way: mercantilism is an economic system that was the precursor of what we now call capitalism. Mercantilism, the primary goal is the accumulation of specie. Specie is gold and silver coinage. So mercantilism is basically an economic system that dictates that the primary goal of your country is to acquire or to amass as much gold and silver as possible, and then that because that is what is considered wealth in your society.
And then the worth of your coin is if you're getting more exports than you are imports, more imports than your exports. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So now you're talking about what was considered the most popular or more successful plan for achieving that goal.
Yeah.
And yes, so that was the basis for what we now call colonialism, where you have what we call a mother country, and a mother country sets out and it goes and it sets up cities. It sets up cities in other countries.
I just like to call it free market, even though I guess technically they had regulations.
No.
I like to call it free market.
Right. No. Mercantilism is the opposite of free market, because under mercantilism, the mother country is the only country that's allowed to produce finished goods. And that's the whole point. It's set up that way, where the mother country, it sets up all these colonies, and the colonies ship over mostly raw goods, and then the raw goods are sent to the mother country, and then the mother country produces finished goods, and then ships them back to the colonies to buy. So, for example,
well, if you wanted to get into business, not locally, but that's because they were still under that rule. They didn't denounce. If that makes sense. Like, if I wanted to trade something in my town, I could. Can you hear me? Or lose connection again?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I hear you.
Yeah, but if I want to do something big market, I would have to, because it's still under that rule. But what I'm also going with this, too, is going to seem kind of random. I just don't know how to set up this, what I'm trying to say. There's another thing, too, is, so my last name is Hollinger, obviously, okay? Well, my name is I think it comes from the origin of the word hill people. And I was kind of looking it up, and we were all farmers, okay? Well, most people were farmers. But where I'm going with this is, your surnames kind of have to do with capitalism, too, in a way, or at least partly of that type of economics and its predecessors. The best way to describe this is, have you played, this is going to seem really weird, but this is actually how I discovered this recently. Resident Evil, I think it's 8, or is it, with the tall lady?
No, way back in time. It probably more like 10 or 12 years ago. I used to play a little Resident Evil, but I haven't played in a long time, basically since college.
Okay, so I'll try my best. In the game, each of the families are in charge of fishing or blacksmithing or something, whatever. Back then, that's actually how it was. So these families would either be farmers or this or that, and you can actually kind of see this even in this is how it was a lot. It just depends, but you can see that in the Indian caste system.
You're right.
Even
you're totally right. In the Anglosphere, or both in German-speaking countries and in English-speaking countries, you're exactly right. That's where we get names like Smith. Smith is one of the most common English last names, because someone will actually be a Smith, or you'll have a last name like Fisher. What do you think he does? And then in Spain, for example, I'm half Mexican. I have a Spanish last name. What they would do is they would take the last name, or the last name of the people were assigned to them by who their local rulers are. If your local ruler, his name was Sancho, they would give your last name and make it into Sanchez, or let's say Gomez or Gonzalez. The "ez" at the end means son of. So it's sure.
Yeah, and where I'm going with this is in your towns and everything, you can only have so many blacksmiths, so many this, so many that, and that's why you may have seen a movie or even a cartoon where someone gets pissed. I've seen this in South Park. They're like, well, I was supposed to be the weed grower. No one else could be the weed grower, just me. And, so that's where all that comes from. And that's why capitalism, or I guess, I think there's different types of mercantilism, in my opinion, and different types of capitalism. But, it's fun at first, but then, and I think also with technology as well, which, makes it so you don't need as much skilled labor. And if you want it, and the other problem is too, with people that are highly into capitalism, and I'm not implying I'm a socialist or anything in any way, but this is a problem I think that they don't want to talk about, is you have to have a certain IQ to be an engineer.
Sure.
Which is not most of the population. It's like 20% of the population has the capability of being an engineer. So now you have that problem.
Hey, Cowboy Mgtow. How many women you think will die by next year by themselves?